aim to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's program. President Marcos summoned Beijing's ambassador to express serious concern after a Chinese Coast Guard ship allegedly hit a Philippine patrol vessel with a military-grade laser that briefly blinded some of its crew. The House of Representatives donated an additional 10 million pesos in humanitarian aid for thousands of earthquake victims in Turkey. Singapore intends to raise its effective tax rate for multinational firms to 15% starting 2025, in line with the global agreement to increase the floor rate. And for those traveling to our ASEAN neighbor Singapore, the government has announced that it'll step down its COVID-19 measures as the city-state establishes a new endemic norm. Good evening, and let's start off with President Marcos summoning Beijing's ambassador to express serious concern after a Chinese Coast Guard ship allegedly hit a Philippine patrol vessel with a military-grade laser that briefly blinded some of its crew. The Philippine Coast Guard said the Philippine patrol boat was supporting a rotation and resupply mission for the Marines in 2nd Thomas Shoal, where the Chinese vessel pointed the laser light at them twice. Let's listen in.
So, after experiencing temporary blindness, sila naman ay agad na bigyan ng medical attention ng ating medical officer on board. And then, pagdating po nila sa puerto, sa Palawan, ay agad po natin itong ipina-check up sa mga doctors doon. At sa kasalukuyan po, sila naman po ay sinasabing naibalik na uli yung ayos silang sight, no, yung vision nila.
Okay.
Ang atin pong komandante ay minimake sure, no, na magkakaroon ng medical attention kung sakaling merong lasting effect. Ang Philippine Coast Guard ay hindi umatras, no.
Okay.
The objective of that escort mission is to make sure na ang RORE mission ay makukumpleto.
Opo.
Kung saan ang indigenous boat na ginamit ng Armed Forces of the Philippines ay makakarating sa BRP Sierra Madre. So it is important for us to highlight that the mission was accomplished. We were able to provide escort. This is already the second time. No? The first time that we experienced the laser pointing of the Chinese Coast Guard was June last year. No? When the BRP Habagat, no? Ito ay isang tugboat, no? Coast Guard tugboat, ay tumutulong din sa pagkakandak ng RORE mission, ay natutukan ng na-expose dito for almost 20 minutes. Kaya lang ang difference is that blue lights ito na ginamit, ngayon ang ginamit nila is green. Where in fact, ang nangyari pa no, nung na-expose ang Coast Guard dito, ay nagkaroon sila ng temporary blindness din at skin itchiness, no? Yung pangangati ng balat.
Now, President Marcos confronted Chinese Ambassador Wang Shilian on Tuesday over the increasing frequency and intensity actions by China against Philippine Coast Guard and our Filipino fishermen, according to spokeswoman Cheloy Velicaria Garafil. The Chinese embassy said the men had discussed, among other things, how to properly manage maritime differences between China and the Philippines. The laser incident happened on February 6, nearly 20 kilometers from 2nd Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, where Philippine Marines are stationed in a derelict Navy ship grounded there to assert Manila's territorial claim in the waters. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin insisted that the Chinese Coast Guard personnel had operated with professionalism and restraint. Mr. Wang said the countries had been in contact via a hotline set up between their respective foreign ministries to discuss maritime issues. Days before the latest incident, the United States and the Philippines agreed to resume joint patrols in the sea and struck a deal to give U.S. troops access to another 4 military bases in the Southeast Asian country. Journalists at Cambodia's online outlet Voice of Democracy, or VOD, one of the country's few remaining local independent media outlets, are in tears after the country's leader ordered its shutdown. Prime Minister Hun Sen has increasingly cracked down on any opposition as he prepares for elections later this year. On Sunday, the strongman leader ordered the shutdown of VOD after taking issue with a news report about his son. Take a look.
Just now, the authority from the Ministry of Information and the local authority, they came to hand over the letter from the Ministry of Information revoking our license to cease all our broadcast. So for now, we will stay silent. We will not continue our broadcast. VOD has been considered one of the last independent media in Cambodia, and it has been playing a key role in providing reliable, credible news to the people. So I let the public and also our media colleague to judge the situation now. Hopefully this is not the end of everything yet, so we will try our best to work with all relevant stakeholders. Hopefully a solution can realize soon.
There is no chance one of Cambodia's last independent media outlets will be allowed to reopen, according to Prime Minister Hun Sen on Tuesday. VOD, broadcasting since 2003, published a February 9 story alleging that Hun Sen's son, Lieutenant General Han Manet, had signed off on funds to help earthquake-hit Turkey. Han Manet, who has been back to succeed his father, has denied the claim, with Prime Minister Hun Sen stating he authorized the $100,000 relief package. Prime Minister Hun Sen demanded an apology from VOD but refused to reconsider his decision to revoke its license even after the outlet later complied. One of the world's longest-serving leaders, Hun Sen has increasingly cracked down on dissent as he prepares for polls in July, according to observers. Press freedoms have long been under attack in Cambodia, where the Cambodia Daily shuttered in 2017 and a score of other outlets closed the following year ahead of 2018 elections. Here in the country, the House of Representatives donated an additional 10 million pesos in humanitarian aid for thousands of earthquake victims in Turkey. The donation, which was raised from the voluntary contributions of House members, was made through the Philippine Red Cross. The amount was in addition to the $100,000 the House, through Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez' Speaker's Disaster Relief and Rehabilitation Initiative, turned over to Turkish Ambassador to the Philippines, Niyazi Icall. Now, former Senator Richard Gordon, who is PRC Chair and Chief Executive Officer, received the donation for Turkey's earthquake victims. On Monday, Ambassador Icall extended his gratitude for the humanitarian aid given by the House to his quake-stricken compatriots. After 180 hours buried under the rubble, a Syrian woman named Abir is now fighting for her life in a Turkish hospital. It's a miracle to reach a patient alive, according to Yilmaz Aydin, an emergency doctor in Hatay. Over a week on from the disaster, the chances of finding survivors like Abir are growing slim, and focus in the affected region is turning to caring for the tens of thousands left injured and the millions made homeless. Take a look.
Sekizinci gündeyiz. 180. saatlerdeyiz. Bu saatlerde enkaz altından hasta yaralı çıkarmak zaten bir mucize. Sabah çıkardığımız hastanın genel durumu iyiydi, ancak son 3-4 hastanın durumları biraz daha kritikti. Yani bu saatlerde takdir edersiniz ki hastalar daha ağır çıkacak. Kiminin artık acil müdahalenin, yani ileri kardiyak yaşam desteğinin verilmesi gerekecek hastalar olacaklardı bu saatlerden sonra.
Nereden aldınız? Kaç tane kişi? Şimdi tansiyon bakalım. Başını orada.
11 tane acil müdahale ünitesi kurarak hizmet vermeye çalıştık. Buradan hastaları stabilleyip civar hastanelere havayolu, karayolu, deniz yoluyla ulaştırdık. Bu çalışmalarımız devam ederken eş zamanlı olarak Sahra Hastanesi'ni kurmaya başladık. Sahra Hastanesi bölgeye yeni donanımlı bir hastane kurulana kadar geçici olarak hastane hizmeti veren bir tesistir. Bu tesiste kurmaya planladığımız bu tesiste 50 yatak kapasiteli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Bu ama sınır 50 değil, artırılabilir.
Kaldırıyoruz. 2, 3.
Elinizi çekin.
Meanwhile, high winds and heavy rain lashed New Zealand as the severe tropical storm Gabriel swept away roads, inundated homes, and left tens of thousands of residents without power. New Zealand has declared a national state of emergency, and officials call it an unprecedented weather event. Here's Mr. Crispin Hipkins, the New Zealand's Prime Minister. Take a look.
Cyclone Gabrielle is the most significant weather event New Zealand has seen this century. The severity and the breadth of the damage that we are seeing has not been experienced in a generation. This morning we declared a national emergency for only the third time in our history. We are still building a picture of the effects of the cyclone as it continues to unfold, but what we do know is the impact is significant and it is widespread. Transpower has declared a grid emergency following the loss of electricity supply to the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne, with potential outages for an extended period of time. Approximately 225,000 customers have been out without power across the North Island. That's a significant increase from the 75,000 yesterday evening.
Now, the disaster has severed roads, collapsed houses, and cut power across a swathe of New Zealand's North Island, home to more than 3/4 of the country's 5 million residents. 3 people were reported dead. Cyclone Gabriel formed off the northeastern coast of Australia in the Coral Sea on February 8 before barreling across the South Pacific. It bore down on New Zealand's northern coast on Sunday, bringing gusts of 140 kilometers an hour. In the next 24 hours, coastal communities were doused with 20 centimeters, almost 8 inches of rain, and pounded by 36-foot waves. Many parts of northern New Zealand were already waterlogged when Cyclone Gabriel hit, having been drenched by record rainfall 2 weeks ago. The National Met Service said Auckland Airport received 48% of its annual average rainfall in just the past 45 days. Cape Reinga, on the northern tip of the Northern Island, recorded 30 consecutive hours of gale-force winds. Massey University professor Christy Kennedy warned that New Zealand is living in the age of cascading natural disasters, where the impacts of repeated severe weather events build up over time. Climate scientist Daisy Stone said Cyclone Gabriel had been feeding off unusually warm seas driven by a combination of climate change and La Nina weather patterns. New Zealand became ASEAN's dialogue partner in 1975. New Zealand is also a founding member of the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, plus a group of defense ministers from the 10 ASEAN countries and its 8 dialogue partners. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary General has warned an increase in the pace at which sea levels are rising, threatening a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale. The climate crisis is causing sea levels to rise faster, bringing a torrent of trouble to almost 1 billion people from London to Los Angeles and Bangkok to Buenos Aires. Let's listen in.
Rising seas threaten lives and jeopardize access to water, food, and health care. Saltwater intrusion can decimate jobs and entire economies in key industries like agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. It can damage or destroy vital infrastructure, including transportation systems, hospitals, and schools, especially when combined with extreme weather events linked to the climate crisis. And rising seas threaten the very existence of some low-lying communities and even countries. Under any scenario, countries like Bangladesh, China, India, and the Netherlands are all at risk. Mega cities on every continent will face serious impacts, including Cairo, Lagos, Maputo, Bangkok, Dhaka, Jakarta, Mumbai, Shanghai, Copenhagen, London, Los Angeles, New York, Buenos Aires, and Santiago. The danger is especially acute for nearly 900 million people who live in coastal zones at low elevations, and that's 1 out of 10 people on Earth. The consequences of all of these are unthinkable. Low-lying communities and entire countries could disappear forever. We would witness a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources.
A new compilation of data from the World Meteorological Organization shows that sea levels are rising fast and the global ocean has warmed faster over the past century than at any time in the past, according to scientists, 11,000 years. Sea levels rise as warmer water expands and ice caps and glaciers melt. Professor Petteri Talas, who's the WMO Secretary General, said that sea level rise imposes risk to economies, livelihoods, settlements, health, well-being, food and water security, and cultural values in the near to long term. Chinese criminals running cryptocurrency scams in Southeast Asia are targeting Filipinos to work for them because of their English language and computer skills. Acting Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs at the Department of Foreign Affairs said Filipinos were prized targets for scam networks operating in Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, according to Eduardo De Vega. Mr. De Vega said efforts to repatriate Filipinos sucked into the scams were ongoing, with more than 100 brought home since last year. Take a look.
Yung iba, sir, hanap ng paraan na magpa-release sa amo. Kasi ang modus operandi niyan, meron tayong alert level ngayon sa hindi pwedeng basta-basta pumunta Myanmar ngayon dahil nga the country is under arrest, no? Hindi kontrolado ng yung teritoryo, kasama na din yung area, ang Miyawadi, sa aming legal scamming factories, no? Ang operation niyan, papangakuan yung mga Pilipino online jobs, jobs as computer encoders, ganon, legitimate jobs sa Bangkok, sa Thailand. Pero pagdating doon, dinadala sila across the border. Ang tingin namin, mga 50, 70 na nadala ng ganon. Marami na nauwi, pero meron pa doon. Ang payo po namin, kung merong anak na gusto umuwi, kontakin kami kasi wala pang, alam nyo po, no, wala pang mga labor attaché, wala pa yung DMW representative sa Bangkok or sa Laos, o kami pa yung... Ang kontakin nyo, ito po, yung sulat ko dito yung meron kaming Facebook page, OFW Help. 24/7 yan. Sa DFA yan. Or kung gusto nyo email, nakikita nyo email yan. omwa@dfa.gov.ph. Pumasok yung military, no? Yung relations ng ASEAN countries in general with Myanmar, they're an ASEAN country. Hindi na sa same level as before habang inaayos pa nila yung political situation nila. Ganun pa the State Administrative Council, yung Tatmadaw, is in control. Yun ang authorities doon. Some weeks ago, dahil sa mga nangyayaring nagpadala tayo ng DFA team, headed by one of our assistant secretaries, para makipag-ugnayan sa kapital ng Myanmar, sa Naypyidaw, at pag-usapan kung paano natin marirescue itong mga na nasa illegal trafficking at paano mapapauwi yung mga expat. So within a week, nabigay na sa embassy. So, nagpapasalamat din kami. Meron din positive kasi alam nyo po, ang problem. Hindi lang nangyayari sa Thailand, Myanmar to, pati sa Laos, sa Cambodia.
Now, the International Organization for Migration said most people trafficked into these illegal online operations came from around Asia, including from Vietnam, India, and Bangladesh. But some were from as far away as Brazil and Kenya. Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar have emerged as countries of destination for victims who tended to be middle-class graduates who have limited employment opportunities at home, according to Itayi Viriri, IOM regional spokesman for Asia Pacific. Online money lending and romance applications, Viriri said the scam centers were involved in online gambling, cryptocurrency. Meanwhile, De Vega, said that the Philippine government had repeatedly warned Filipinos against bypassing official employment channels when looking for work abroad. In other news, President Marcos assured that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Filipinos are with him for a peaceful resolution in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, President Marcos made the commitment during a phone call with Zelensky last Monday. He said, "I had the pleasure of talking to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday, meaning Monday, and I told him that we in the Philippines are watching with admiration the bravery and the nationalism that has been displayed by the Ukrainians during this crisis, and that we join in his effort to reach a peaceful resolution to the ongoing conflict in his country. Mr. President, we are with you in your search for peace," Marcos tells Zelensky. For his part, President Zelensky thanked President Marcos for supporting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Had the first phone call in the history of bilateral relations with the President of the Philippines, thanked him for supporting sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. He said, "We discussed further deepening of cooperation, in particular on international platforms," according to President Zelensky. Since Russia began its invasion of February 24 last year, over 7,967 or 7.9 million people have fled Ukraine and taken refuge in other European countries, according to a tally by the UN Refugee Agency. The Philippines, under both the Duterte and Marcos administrations, has consistently opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In other news, Singapore intends to raise its effective tax rate for multinational firms to 15% starting 2025. This is in line with global agreement to increase the floor rate. The city-state will join the broader international move and implement a domestic top-up tax to bring the city-state's effective corporate tax rate to that level, according to Finance Minister Lawrence Wong in his annual budget speech, referring to the so-called BEPS 2.0 agreement signed by more than 135 countries in 2021. Take a look.
The EU recently announced its plans to implement Pillar 2 in phases, starting effectively from 2024. Other jurisdictions like the UK and Switzerland have announced their intention to do the same. As the rules will be implemented progressively, the full effects will only be felt in 2025 or later. Given these developments, I intend to implement Pillar 2 from 2025. As part of the broader international move to align minimum global corporate tax rates for large M&E groups. When we do so, we will implement a domestic top-up tax, which will top up the M&E group's effective tax rate in Singapore to 15%. At the same time, we will review and update our broader suite of industry development schemes to ensure that Singapore remains competitive in attracting and retaining investments.
Now, this is part of Singapore's plan to implement Pillar 2 under the Global Anti-Base Erosion or GLOBE rules of the Base Erosion and Profit Shifting or BEPS 2.0 project beginning 2025. Now, what is BEPS 2.0? Base erosion and profit shifting is where companies use tax planning strategies to exploit gaps and mismatches in tax rules to artificially shift profits to locations with no or low tax rates and little to no economic activity, according to the Ministry of Finance website. BEPS 2.0 is the outcome of the OECD's efforts to tackle such tax evasion activities, as tasked to do so by the G20. And for those traveling to our ASEAN neighbor, Singapore, the government just announced that it'll step down its COVID-19 measures as the city-state establishes a new endemic norm. Take a look.
Mask wearing on public transport as well as healthcare settings will no longer be required under the temporary COVID-19 regulations, and this will take effect from 13th February. However, mask wearing may still be a sectoral or industrial requirement. For example, the Ministry of Health, Minister Ong has mentioned, there will still, under the Ministry of Health, it will still be required to wear masks for visitors, staff and patients, particularly in indoor healthcare and residential care settings, such as hospital wards, clinics and nursing homes. On food safety, for example, SFA, Singapore Food Authority, will continue to require food handlers to wear a mask or spit guard. Private enterprises and industries may also decide to continue mask wearing requirements for workplace safety and health or business continuity purposes. Mask wearing remains an effective way to minimize the transmission of infectious diseases, and therefore we encourage members of the public, especially those who are unwell or who are more vulnerable, such as the elderly or the immunocompromised, to wear masks in crowded places. Second, we will adjust our measures for migrant workers. We introduced the Popular Places Pass in June last year to manage crowding in 4 designated popular locations among migrant workers on Sundays and public holidays. Now that our COVID-19 situation has improved and we are moving to DORSCON Green, we will discontinue the Popular Places Pass from 13 February. We will also align the public health measures for migrant workers living in dormitories with the updated general advisory for the community. The global COVID-19 situation has improved, with imported cases having a low impact on our healthcare system. From 13 February, all travelers will no longer need to show proof of a negative pre-departure test, nor be required to purchase COVID-19 travel insurance.
Now, the vaccinated travel framework will remain in place for reactivation if there are international developments of concern, such as new severe variants or signs that Singapore's healthcare capacity is strained by imported cases. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.